Okay, I think we'll get started. On behalf of the Friends of Fort Hunter, welcome everybody to our next virtual illustrated lecture in the series we began because of COVID, because everybody did things virtually back in 2020, and it's been so well received that we've stuck with this virtual format. I want to welcome you on this International Women's Day to our presentation, which is connected to that. And I thank Hannah Ison for thinking of connecting the two themes together for us. It's also Women's History Month, so we've got all of those themes tied up with tonight's presentation. And I will introduce Hannah in just a second. I want to remind everyone of the chat function at the bottom of your screen. I have put the website for Fort Hunter there. If you want to look up more information on upcoming programs, dates, calendars, etc. And someone has also added there the date and information on the Dauphin County Brew Fest, which is totally appropriate to tonight's topic. We have the Garden Fair. That'll be our first big spring outdoors event at Fort Hunter on the first Sunday in May, May 7th. So mark your calendar for that. And the last lecture in this year's series, heading into summer when we don't do lectures, will be on April 12th. And we're going to be hearing about the Red Cross, specifically in Pennsylvania, with some reference to Harrisburg and so forth, from a representative from the National Red Cross. So mark your calendar for April 12th. I want to thank Hannah and welcome Hannah Ison, who is brewer and master of just about everything at ZeroDay Brewing in Harrisburg, for, as I said, connecting the dots to the International Women's Day being today, and the topic we wanted to talk about, beer and the history of beer and beer making, and particularly women's role in beer making. Women, I know the one piece, women have often been the brewmaster of many, many families. And we know there was a tavern at Fort Hunter. We know they distilled whiskey. We can assume they probably made beer. We don't have a lot of record of that, but it seemed if there was a tavern, it was appropriate to talk about beer. So without any more of me, we will hear from, and I will turn it over to Hannah Ison. So thank you, Hannah.
Thank you all so much. It is a pleasure to be here. I have never presented in a virtual format like this before. I have spoken in front of people, and I'm always nervous no matter what. So bear with me here. A lot of what I do is like behind the scenes stuff. I used to be a bartender and a lot more like on. So, just bear with me. I'm going to share my screen now. Let me see here. We practice this, so hopefully I can do it right. Share. Okay. Okay. Says you all can see. And we're going to view the slideshow. Cool. Okay. I do want to make that go away. Cool. Awesome. All right. So when I was first asked to present, I looked at the date on the calendar and I was like, oh, well, that's International Women's Day. So they'd asked me to speak about beer since that's, what I do. But I thought it would be really natural to connect it to the history of women in the brewing industry and really dive into that. Brewing is now a male dominated industry, and we'll go into some stats about that later when we get into the modern times part of my lecture. But historically, women kind of always took on that role. And so I'm going to walk you all through that. First, a little bit about me, just so you know who I am. I'm a toddler mom. I have a 3-year-old daughter named Morgan, and she is my pride and joy. She is also the number one reason why, if you think I look kind of sleepy right now, why I definitely am. She's awesome. She keeps me on my toes, and she's my source of inspiration for everything I do. She is really smart and also like really mechanically minded. So she pokes around in the brewery a lot, but not when production is happening, but it's really fun to watch her try to take things apart and just figure out how everything works. I think she would be way better at this job than I ever will be. So be interesting to see what she decides to do, but she's pretty mechanically minded. I will say that about her. I am a resident of Midtown Harrisburg. I am going to be a long-term resident. 1 year ago last week, I purchased a home here in Midtown, which was a dream of mine since I moved here from Kentucky back in 2015. My background is in political science. That's what my degree is in. I was working on campaigns, and that's how I ended up in Harrisburg. I had bounced around a lot before I moved to Harrisburg. I worked on a campaign and like maintained residency out in Las Vegas and then Phoenix, Arizona and Manhattan. And then back to Kentucky for a little bit. So I had lived in 5 different states the last year and a half before I landed in Harrisburg. And honestly, I thought that was going to be another campaign job and passing through. But I fell in love with the community that is Midtown Harrisburg, and the city in general, and just its proximity to the Appalachian Trail, the mountains, and then being able to hop on a train. Growing up in Kentucky, being able to hop on a train and like be in New York in a few hours was like one of the coolest things ever. So I really fell in love with this area and decided I was going to stay here and kind of build my life here. I started working for ZeroDay which is a brewery in Midtown Harrisburg, if you're not familiar with it. I started working here in 2016, and that was part-time as a bartender. And then I ended up leaving my full-time job so that I could learn how to brew beer professionally. A lot of people who become professional brewers have a little bit more credentials than just drinking beer. That was really the only thing on my resume that connected me to brewing. But I'm a quick learner, and the owners of ZeroDay they started their own like in-house training program, and I was up and running brewing independently within the first 6 months of taking that leap of faith. So after that, so that was in 2017. The company has grown significantly since then, but I'll dive into that a little bit more on the next couple slides. I went through being an assistant brewer to being a brewer to being production manager. And now I'm the director of operations at ZeroDay. So we have a full-time sales team that is out in the field trying to get our beer into more people's hands. So I've really kind of spearheaded taking on that arm of the business and building out that revenue stream, and also while managing brewing staff. So kind of have my hands in a lot of different pots of the business, I guess you could say. I also like doing extracurricular things. So I am on the Master Brewers Association of the Americas. I'm a member of the MBAA, but I'm also on their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Committee, which has afforded me lots of different opportunities to help spread the message of and the importance of DEI work in our industry. And I have met some really dynamic people while doing that. So really cool opportunities there. And then I still have to keep my hands in the political sphere some. So I'm also on the Brewers of Pennsylvania. That is our state guild. It's a chapter of the Brewers Association, which is a national trade organization for brewing. But I am specifically on the legislative committee for the brewers of Pennsylvania. So I got to meet the governor day before yesterday, which was a really cool experience. We did our hill climb, and he gave us like 10 minutes of his time the day before the budget address, which was super cool. Beer is obviously a nonpartisan issue, so it's really cool for me to be able to flex those political muscles on both sides of the aisle and just really still foster that part of my background, and still maintain some ties to that. So that's enough about me. See. So this is the outline of what we're going to be talking about today. That's a picture of me dry hopping, just so I can prove to you that I do work in the brewery. I don't know. I didn't know what else to put there, so maybe it doesn't fit, but we're going to go through the history of some ancient civilizations and women's role in brewing in those societies. Then we'll go through into the medieval times and the Industrial Revolution. And then it'll bring us to modern day. And we'll talk a little bit about where we are today and what we're trying to do. I will say, I know this is a historical society. I am not a historian. I have done a lot of research to be able to present this to you all, but I am no expert. A lot of the research that I have done has led me back to a lot of work from one particular historian. Her name is Tara Nurin, and she just published a book about the history of women in brewing. And she's the official historian for the Pink Boots Society, which we'll talk more about later. But it's really funny. So many sources that I found while compiling this research, she had been a part of getting that information out there. So she is a pretty dynamic person in bringing to life or bringing to us this history of women in brewing. Yeah. So that being said, like I said, I work for ZeroDay. ZeroDay opened in April of 2015. So we are about to celebrate our 8-year anniversary here in a few weeks. Actually 1 month from today, it'll be April 8th. ZeroDay's mission statement is to create high quality products and experiences in an environment where all members of our diverse community feel welcomed and represented, sharing a meticulously crafted beer experience. I had to look that up because our one-liner that we usually tell people is that we want to be a community living room for people who live in Harrisburg and people traveling through or people of our neighboring communities. So we have really made a concerted effort to create spaces where all kinds of people create spaces and a product where all kinds of people feel like they can be a part of it. So here are just a few different pictures, little snippets of what we have done over the last few years. This one right here on the bottom left, that is in our original tap room, which is on Riley Street in Midtown. That's one of our snow day parties. We were always kind of known for not closing, even when the weather was crazy. The owners actually like stayed at the brewery during Storm Jonas with that blizzard that brought like 3 feet of snow, which happened to be my first Pennsylvania winter, and that was wild. But they were able to do that because the people that worked here lived here. And so it was safe for them to get to work. And we were just really able to provide that space for the community to come. Everybody was off work. And so it was just really, those are some of the memories that I always hear coming when people are talking about the old tap room. But that is on Riley Street, and we still are in this facility, but not in a public facing way. Now this whole entire space has been, where you see all those people there, that's filled with tanks. Back there, the back where the Zero is, that's a canning space. We got our own canning line back during the summer of 2020, when everybody kind of had to start selling their beer to go. And yeah, so we rehabbed a building down on 3rd Street. It's 925 North 3rd Street. And that's this storefront you see right here. We rehabbed that in 2019, 2020, and we opened it in March of 2021. But at the same time that we were going through all of those build out, we tore down the wall that had separated our original production facility from the tap room, and we expanded all that space where you see those people, and it's full of tanks that we grew into. So there has been a lot of growth. We actually had planned to do these construction projects before everything shut down. We had a press release come out on February 29th. That was a leap year, 2020. February 29th of 2020, we announced that we were doing all this expansion. And then 2 weeks later, everything shut down. So it was really scary at first, but we just adapted and went with it. And we were able to really scale back our production because the need wasn't there. For a while, we weren't even allowed to sell. I think we could always sell to-go beer. I don't know. The rules changed so much, but the demand definitely shrank. We were just selling to people in our parking lot with, masks and gloves and stuff, while we were also building out this new space in hopes that we would be able to have people come in there. And it did. It worked out. We were able to open in March of 2021. And so this is, this on the top right is just a little snapshot of part of that new tap room. We have couches and a 60-foot long bar. We have a private event space. So, and then an outdoor patio area, which you can see over here on the top left. That is the white building back there is the liquor control board offices. So it's funny, we're right in their backyard. Always on our P's and Q's. We would be anyways, but
Anna, this is Barbara. I was just going to jump in because we have about 40 minutes left. I didn't know if you wanted to time yourself.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm almost, done with this one. But so this is our, that's the patio. And then I do want to mention right here, the bottom, the center, that is, that's one of our locations at the Broad Street Market. And that space is really, really special to us because it's so different. It's a community gathering place where we kind of met people where they were. And we have had so many new customers and people trying our product by meeting them where they were, that we might not have ever seen before. So it's been really cool to have those different business models flourish and try to serve as a community space, a community gathering space. The reason why I said all that is because Fort Hunter had a tavern house named the Practical Farmer, and this is straight from the Fort Hunter website, but it was built to sell brandies and whiskeys to accommodate overnight travelers and to serve as a community center for surrounding farmers. So people came, they gathered, travelers and community members alike came to this central spot, and over alcohol and commiserated. And, we're still doing that all these years later. So that's the connection to Fort Hunter that I was trying to find. But we'll go into the history, which is probably what you all are here for. So humans have been drinking beer for almost 7,000 years. The origin of beer is debated by historians, but they pretty much universally agree that it was women who were the original brewers. Beer soon became ancient Mesopotamia's favorite drink. And although the craft of brewing would eventually be practiced across the region, it began in the small village of Godin Tepe and was certainly initiated and cultivated by women. That is according to scholar Stephen Bertman. So let's see. Sumer, we're all familiar with that, I believe. Mesopotamia is the first civilization where humans intentionally brewed barley-based beer, as they had settled into an agrarian society. That's according to Tara Nuren, the historian for the Pink Boot Society, who I mentioned earlier. Beer, some think that it was probably an accident how beer was discovered, because they were cultivating grain, and they believe that it picked up a natural yeast in the air and fermented, and then somebody tried it and they're like, oh, this makes me feel good. So they wanted to really keep making it. I found it really interesting. Like, I remember studying about Mesopotamia when I was in middle school, but while I was gathering this information, I had no idea that women had held close equal status as men in Sumer. So they were allowed to work and held a variety of jobs. So they were able to sell their goods and work in a whole bunch of different fields. Most of them were still male dominated, but women basically controlled the brewing industry, which I found pretty fascinating. There is a Sumerian goddess of beer and brewing. Her name is Ninkasi. She was worshipped by the Sumerians, and her role was to supervise the brewers, and they believe that she was the head brewer to the gods. The earliest known record of beer was written in cuneiform, and it is the hymn to Ninkasi. It praises Ninkasi, and it also describes the brewing process and gives us a ancient brewing recipe. It's fascinating. They believe that the hymn was sung while the Sumerians brewed, and it was passed down from the brewmasters to their apprentices. Beer was really highly valued in that society. And brewers were paid really well. So they lived it was like a revered profession, which I found super interesting too. Yeah, I'll move on to the next one. It is believed that the straw was first invented by Sumerians to be able to drink beer without having to sip on the sediment that would have, and the gunk that collected, I guess, at the top. So they wanted to pierce through that and be able to drink the liquid. And there's all kinds of depictions of this throughout all over. If I don't have a photo credit on here, it is because it said it was public domain. So I was trying to be I don't know all of the rules of this, to be perfectly honest, but I was trying to be really good about that. That's why you don't see one there. So they believe that the Sumerians taught their neighbors, the Egyptians, but they brought brewing to their neighbors. The ancient Egyptians also worshipped a goddess of beer, Tenenet. There are lots of depictions on hieroglyphics of women brewing and drinking beer. When you study those ancient hieroglyphics, beer was produced by women in the homes in ancient Egypt, but there were also large-scale production breweries that formed in that society, and those were more male-dominated. I don't believe that women held the same equal status to men in ancient Egypt as they did in Sumer. I also learned that Cleopatra imposed a really unpopular tax on beer, on commercial beer, to help pay for the wars with Rome. A lot of scholars believe that she lost popularity toward the end of her reign, more for implementing the tax on the beer than she did for the wars against Rome, which is what she imposed the tax for anyways. Found that really interesting. Takes us to medieval times. Brewing was a job outside of the home that women were allowed to have in Europe. They could also be tavern owners, and those things went hand in hand a lot. A lot of taverns made their own beer. This is where we see the term brewster pop up. That is a professional woman brewer. We've kind of lost that term in our lexicon over the centuries, but it is neat that they differentiated that back then. Women brewed low alcohol, unhopped liquid called ale. Because it wasn't hopped, hops are a natural preservative, but because it was unhopped, it spoiled quickly. It had to be drank within days after making it. So it had to be consumed quickly. And if there was a surplus, a lot of times the women would sell it for a minimal profit. But they weren't really able to start up their own places at these times because they lacked legal status. Then we have the rise of the Industrial Revolution. Machinery is invented and mainstream hops are being utilized. Hops were discovered like in ancient China, but mainstream, where they're being used commercially to brew, didn't really start until these Industrial Revolution times. So hops allowed beer to last longer, so it could be brewed in higher quantities than it was being brewed before in the homes. So if it lasts longer, they can make more of it and sell it. And all this machinery was being developed. But because of lacking legal status and access to their own money, women lacked capital to invest in the machinery to start their own production breweries. So the industry of commercialized brewing, despite all of that ancient history and all of the work that women had done over centuries, once money became involved, it became a male-dominated field. So that takes us into, so then we have kind of this like lapse in women's role, really. In colonial America, the women, they still brewed some in the homes, like they brought those traditions over. And I know Ben Franklin is called one of the fathers of home brewing, but really it was his wife who was doing most of that brewing, I read. So, but that's really in those ancient times, or not ancient, in those colonial times, but women's role was very domestic. So that's why I've kind of jumped into where we are today, because like there's a whole big history of beer, but we're talking about women's role in that. So we pop back up pretty much in the 80s, but these statistics are alarming to me. Only 7.5, now these numbers are from 2019, so it might have gone up a little bit, but as of 2019, only 7.5% of brewing staff in the US are women. There is a much higher percentage of women who own breweries, and there is a much higher percentage of people who work in the industry who are women that aren't in production roles, but under 10% of the entire people producing beer in the US right now being women is that's a pretty significant fact. This was gathered from the Brewers Association member benchmarking survey. There are some other very alarming facts about lack of diversity in the industry that you can see on here too. But for our purposes, we're kind of focusing on women's role right now. So I'm not prepared to dive into the other, but those numbers are there. And they're pretty astounding to me. So some of the modern pioneers of women who were in brewing as commercial brewing became after Prohibition became legal again. Carol Stout, one of our own Pennsylvanians, she is dubbed the Queen of Hops. And she founded Stout's Brewing Company, which is in Lancaster County, in 1987, which is the year that a lot of commercial breweries started opening up, a lot of the original ones post-Prohibition. So it was a pretty competitive year to open. She opened Stout's with her husband, Ed. And she was the first American female brewmaster post-Prohibition. It's really amazing. I was just at a German beer fest in Philadelphia, and Ed Stout unfortunately passed away last month. But when people were talking about Ed, every single conversation I heard was people were saying Carol Stout's husband, and not the other way around. So she ran that place, and she was the brewer. So she's a pretty dynamic person. I've got to meet her. She's someone I really look up to. And then another one of the modern day pioneers of women in brewing is Kim Jordan. She is a co-founder of New Belgium Brewing Company. She opened it in 1991. She served as the CEO for 15 years, and she now serves as the executive chair. So she is still in the industry, and she is still serving all of us well, even those of us who do not work for her. We have a professional trade organization that was formed in 2007 by Terry Farendorf. She is another female brewer who was kind of paving the way. She founded it for camaraderie, and what she found is that a lot of women, said that they felt like they were the only woman that they knew who brewed. So it was really like a way to connect people back then. But now what their main goal is to provide access to educational opportunities for women in brewing. So there are all kinds of wonderful scholarship programs that this 501c3 offers. That original meeting was at the Craft Brewers Conference, and there were 22 people in attendance. As of 2001, there are 74 different chapters globally, and there's over 2,000 members in the entire society. I really connect with that feeling of feeling like you're one of the only ones. I became pregnant while I was brewing, and I had no idea what to do because all of my cohorts, not just where I work, but all over the region, were men, and nobody had really dealt with it before. So it was really nice to be able to have a place to go to really try to figure out what to do there. And honestly, there really weren't a lot of resources there. It was we still kind of had to pave the way for ourselves. And but I definitely personally connect with that feeling of like, you can do the work, but there are things about you that make you a little bit different than a man. So that is a brewer. So it's awesome that like an organization like this exists. I think the Pink Boots Society, they do a lot of fundraisers, and International Women's Day is the biggest day of like a worldwide collaboration where people are brewing with the same type of hops, the special Pink Boots blend. And that's that picture you see down there on the bottom center. I hosted a Pink Boots collab day with some of our staff back in, that was 2020, right? No, yes, that was 2020. My daughter was 2 months old and she was there. She's not in the picture, but yeah. And then the other one is just another collaboration in Philadelphia. So Brave Noise is it's a collaboration to promote a safe and discrimination-free beer industry. Back in 2021, I think it was, a female brewer posted on her Instagram story. She had just experienced someone coming in and not treating her. It was a vendor, but they were coming in and they weren't treating her like she was actually the brewer. And so she posted about it on, like, they were looking for the man to talk to, even though she was the person in charge. She posted on her Instagram and asked if anybody else had ever experienced sexism or discrimination in the industry. And she got thousands of responses, and she shared a lot of these, and it became this viral or like a reckoning for our industry. And it really kind of put a lot of things into perspective. And it really, and so they created this collaboration, a beer that advocates for safe spaces and inclusive environments by requesting breweries to be transparent with their policies and commit to long-term work. So in order to be a part of the collaboration, you had to submit your mission statement and your value statement, and you also were held accountable to uphold those values. So it's been a way for to bring a lot of those issues to light, but also to hold each other accountable, to really make sure that we don't stand for that kind of treatment anymore. That the woman who started that, she just had her daughter, and she brewed up until the day before her due date. So 40 weeks pregnant, she was on the brew deck. So she is awesome. She's pretty cool. And finally, with the last slide of where we are today, after that Me Too movement that really swept across the industry in 2021, a bunch of different, the most prominent trade societies across the US got together to form a coalition to try to foster an equitable and inclusive brewing community. So not only was this like beer collaboration trying to hold people accountable at that level, but also the different organizations were also trying at that level to do the same thing. So BREW stands for Brewing, Respect, and Unity Coalition. Their objective is to leverage the combined reach of the organizations to drive industry-wide adoption of evidence-based best practices for preventing discrimination and harassment and violence within the brewing industry. So you've got your super sciencey groups, the American Society of Brewing Chemists, the Brewers Association, which is more political. Cicerone certification is like beer servers, Master Brewers Association, and their scientific society, and then the Pink Boots Society. So all these different groups came together, and yeah, there's different initiatives that at that level are just trying to make sure that we're all upholding our values and just treating each other with respect. Kind of going back to the roots of beer, just, has always been a unifier. So we want to make sure that we're upholding that and being there for each other. Yeah, and that's what I've got. I hope that was long enough. If anybody has questions, that's just a picture of our beer coming off the line. It's really, really cool to see your beer in cans. It takes so much work to get it to that point. So it was just a cool picture with a lot of stainless that I thought would be fun to throw in there. Plus, it's a lager, and it's one of my favorite beers.
The time's perfect, so thank you. And we do have some questions. First, are there any other women brewers at breweries in central Pennsylvania?
In central Pennsylvania, yes, I know of a few. I know of one woman definitely or I guess two, at Chatty Monk's Brewery, which would be in, I think that's Lancaster County. It might be Berks County, maybe. I feel like, I hope I'm not missing somebody that's right here around the area.
Well, while you think about that, are you working on any fun new brews for the spring summer season?
Oh yeah, we are. Our anniversary is coming up, and we're going to roll out a session IPA for that. So like a lower alcohol West Coast style IPA, which is one of my favorite styles. We have my absolute favorite beer that we make. It's new as of last year. It's like a Mexican style lager, but the new thing about it, it's called City Islander, kind of named after City Island here in Harrisburg. But the new thing about it is it's going to be in cans, and it's going to be that perfect, like crushable by the pool beer. It's so good with a lime. And that's what I want all spring, summer long. So my goal is to have that one out by the 5th of May. So I hope.
Is it just me who remembers the City Islanders with the soccer team?
Yeah. So they actually, they wanted us to make like an official beer for them. There ended up, once the Washington Nationals, the Senators became part of that, like there was some weird like stadium legal things. And so the City Islanders couldn't actually play on the island.
Right.
They ended up being at like Penn State Harrisburg. And I don't think that they are, I think the team dismantled.
Yeah,
I absolutely remember them. I have a scarf.
The name was retro back to then. Okay, another question. Are there notable preferences in women and men's notable differences in women and men's preferences in types of beer?
I don't think so. I think that is a common misconception. I think that all beer is a woman's beer, and all beer is a man's beer. I mean, we make a hard seltzer, and there are all kinds of men who drink that. And we've got big stouts that's all that some women want to drink. So I really, from my days of bartending, I never saw like a certain gender gravitate towards any beer over another gender. But that is something that in advertising and stuff that kind of used to be said, I think, like, but I think in actual practice, I don't see that.
Yeah. Do you think women's representation in brewing has provided unique beer flavors and styles?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think the more people that are in anything, can help round out those preferences or ideas, right? Like the more people that you have participating, like the more ideas will come. But I can't think of any specific example of that, but I do believe that would be true.
What educational opportunities are available for women who want to get into the beer industry?
So there are a few different ways. There's no, some universities are bringing in brewing science programs. It's really hard for a lot of these places to develop 4-year degrees. A lot of it being because you have to like approach legislatures to allow for students to be able to drink for educational purposes when they're not 21. So, and a lot of states are reluctant to do that. And the natural course of that kind of a 4-year degree program, like you would start off with like flavor development and that tasting off flavors, and it wouldn't make sense to do that part like 3 years in. So that is, from people on the in academia, that is a really big hurdle to overcome at a lot of places. I will say there are a lot of 2-year degree programs or workforce development programs around.
Shippensburg has
one.
Yeah.
Okay. Shippensburg has one. Hack did. I don't think it's active right now. A lot of these programs lost. I don't know if they lost funding or what, but like we're still seeing the after effects of COVID, and they haven't started back up yet. There is a really unique trade or vocational program. This is based out of the Pittsburgh area, but I'm hoping that it can make its way toward it into central PA. But it's at Trace Brewing in Pittsburgh, and they have a 6-month training program where people are taught how to do basic cellar stuff and packaging. They aren't put on the brew deck, but they are given provided skills to, and they're paid for it too. There's really no unpaid anything that should happen in the industry now. But they're taught these skills, and the idea is that they're not taught these skills to then be able to work for that brewery, because that brewery only has so much capacity. But they're taught these skills, and then they can enter the workforce as a skilled worker that way.
Do you personally have a favorite style of beer?
I do. I love light lagers. I think a Helles lager is my favorite style. It's a German style, and it traditionally comes out in the spring. So I am super excited about spring beers. I really love like Oktoberfest and Marzens too in the fall, but there's something about like a light malty lager and spring is just my favorite season anyway. So that definitely a Helles lager is my favorite style.
Is there a beer version of a sommelier?
There is. It's called a cicerone. So there's many different levels, just like a sommelier. So there's the level 1, which is like a certified beer server trainer. And then there's tons I passed that. A lot of bartenders have that, but then the next level jumps up, and it's a pretty intense training. And then the 3rd and 4th levels, I mean, there are only like a handful of people in the US who have that 4th level cicerone. It's intense. But yep, that's what's called cicerone with a C.
Well, I think that was our last question. And, thank you again. I do want to say to everybody who's still here, upcoming March 19th at Fort Hunter is the Little Friends Tea Party. And April 1st is Archibald McAllister's birthday celebration. These are things that you can sign up for. Again, go to that forthunter.org website if you want to look up more information. I know the tea party involves stuffed pets, dolls. Bring your best little stuffed friend with your child for the tea party. And the birthday party for McAllister, for Archibald McAllister, will be quite fascinating, and also offer some, happy birthday type celebration. So you can sign up for those, as well as we mentioned. Our next lecture is April 12th on the Red Cross. Garden fair is coming up. It'll soon be spring, May 7th. So lots of things to check out on the website. Thank you again, Hannah. People are jumping into the chat to say thank you, how great the presentation it was. And I certainly add my thanks and kudos to those as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, you all. Thanks for putting up.
We can all check out the brewery. I put the address in the chat in case they missed you saying it was on North 3rd Street. So you can look that up, and maybe we will all run into each other there someday.
Yeah, awesome. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.